Are you claustrophobic? You are about to find out. Take a deep breath. Now imagine you can never exhale fully again. Every breath you take is shorter than the last because the walls around you are closing in by the millimeter. Today, we document 6 agonizing cases where people were crushed by the weight of their own bodies and the architecture they trusted. Warning: this video will make you check the space behind you. November 28, 2009. Council Bluffs, Iowa. A severe winter storm is hammering the streets, but for 25-year-old Larry Ely Murillo Moncada, the most dangerous storm is happening inside his own mind. He is in the grips of a chaotic mental health crisis, triggering a primal flight response. Terrified of hallucinations, he sprints barefoot into the freezing blizzard, running toward the only place that feels structured: the no-frills supermarket where he works. He reaches the store, but the panic does not subside. He needs to hide. He enters the back storage area and climbs on top of the massive industrial freezer units. It is a common habit for employees to take breaks up there, a warm space 12 feet above the floor. But in his agitated state, his spatial awareness fails him. He does not realize that the massive bank of coolers does not sit flush against the building's rear wall. There is a gap. It is a narrow, invisible void, approximately 18 inches wide. It is a dark canyon between the back of the steel freezer and the concrete wall. In the darkness, Larry misjudges his footing. Gravity takes over. He slips and plunges feet first into the crevice, falling 12 feet down into the abyss behind the coolers. He hits the floor, but he is not broken. He is trapped. This is where the specific dimensions of his body turn the architecture into a torture device. The gap is exactly wide enough to accept a falling human body, but too narrow to allow any movement. He is wedged upright. His chest is compressed by the heavy steel of the industrial cooler on one side and the rough concrete on the other. He tries to move, but the physics of the wedge effect take hold. Gravity pulls him down, but the friction of his clothes against the walls prevents him from pushing back up. He cannot lift his knees because the walls are too close. He is effectively in a straitjacket made of building materials. He is alive. He is conscious. And he begins to scream. But fate has one more cruel variable. The refrigeration units are powered by massive compressors located on top of the coolers, the very platform he just fell from. These machines generate a constant, deafening mechanical roar, a wall of white noise over 90 decibels. Down in the gap, Larry is screaming for his life, but his voice is mathematically erased by the drone of the motors. He is less than 3 feet away from co-workers stocking shelves. He is feet away from customers buying milk. But acoustically, he is miles away. No one can hear him. The environment behind the cooler is not cold. It is the exhaust zone for the compressors. It is hot, dusty, and intensely dry. Larry is trapped in a vertical coffin, subjected to the heat of the machines designed to keep the food cold. Hours turn into days. The heat accelerates dehydration. His body, unable to shift weight to relieve pressure, begins to fail. Eventually, exhaustion wins. He slips into unconsciousness, and his heart stops. The noise of the supermarket continues. The store opens and closes. Larry is listed as a missing person. No one thinks to look behind the fridge. The years begin to pass. 1 year, 5 years, 8 years. The supermarket continues to operate. Thousands of people walk past the dairy section, completely oblivious to the human body decomposing just inches behind the metal paneling. The heat from the compressors acts as a dehydrator, mummifying the remains and masking the smell. He becomes a ghost in the machine. It is not until January 2019, a full decade later, that the store closes down. Contractors pull the massive freezer units away from the wall. In the pile of dust, they see a shoe, then a leg. They find a body, frozen in a silent scream, still wearing the blue uniform from 10 years prior. Larry never left. He had been waiting there, trapped in an 18-inch hell, while the world shopped for groceries just inches away from his face. March 22, 1959, Castleton, England. Beneath the picturesque rolling green hills of the Derbyshire countryside lies a massive, jagged geological scar known as Peak Cavern. Locally, it bears a crude, ancient name, the Devil's Arse. It is a wet, freezing labyrinth of limestone and shadow, a place where the sun has not touched the rock for millions of years. On this particular Sunday, a 20-year-old philosophy student named Neil Moss arrives at the cave entrance. Neil is not an amateur. He is an active, athletic member of the British Caving Association. He is young, structurally fit, and possesses the ideal physiology for spelunking: lean, wiry, and strong. Unlike the previous stories where weight or size created the trap, Neil is about to be imprisoned by the fundamental, unstoppable mechanics of his own respiratory system. The team's objective is a narrow, previously unexplored vertical shaft located nearly a mile deep inside the cave system. The shaft leads straight down, a geological throat that seems to promise a new, undiscovered chamber below. Neil volunteers to descend first. He climbs down a cable ladder into the darkness. The shaft is tight, barely wide enough for his shoulders, but the real danger is not the stone itself. It is the texture. The walls are not solid, dry rock. They are coated in a thick, slick layer of clay and moisture, a geological slime that reduces friction to zero. Neil reaches the bottom, roughly 40 feet down, but finds a dead end. A boulder blocks the way. He signals to return. He puts his foot on the ladder to climb back up, and the nightmare begins. The ladder, slick with mud and unable to find purchase on the slimy floor, twists and fouls. Neil slips. The sudden movement disturbs the environment, and he slides deeper into the narrowest point of the shaft. He is now wedged. But unlike a typical rock entrapment where you are stuck between hard surfaces, Neil is stuck in a mixture of stone and viscous, wet clay. He is alive, he is calm, and he waits for the rope. The team above drops a line. They tie it around his chest. They pull. And here, the laws of physics betray them all. The rope snaps. The friction of the rock and the suction of the mud are stronger than the tensile strength of the hemp line. Neil falls back, exhausted. And now, the true, horrific mechanism of the concrete lung sets in. This is a phenomenon of pure biological terror. To breathe, the human chest must expand. The intercostal muscles pull the ribs out, and the diaphragm pulls down to create a vacuum that draws air into the lungs. But Neil is encased in a semi-fluid mixture of mud and rock. Every time he exhales, his chest contracts, shrinking his volume by a fraction of an inch. In that split second, the slick, heavy mud slides down to fill the microscopic gap his empty lungs just created. It acts like a mechanical check valve. When he tries to inhale again, the mud does not move back. It has solidified around his new, smaller shape. He cannot expand his chest to its previous size. With every single breath cycle, the walls of his prison get tighter. It is a slow-motion ratchet effect. He is literally burying himself from the inside out simply by the act of staying alive. The rescuers above work frantically. They can hear him, and he can hear them. He remains stoic, apologizing for the nuisance he is causing. But the situation is deteriorating. The shaft is so narrow that the rescuers effectively block the airflow just by being there. The carbon dioxide from Neil's own desperate, shallow breaths begins to pool at the bottom of the pit. Carbon dioxide is heavier than oxygen. It sinks. He is not just being crushed. He is drowning in foul air. The atmosphere becomes toxic. Neil becomes delirious. His speech slurs as the CO2 narcosis sets in, a warm, fuzzy blanket of death that masks the agony of his crushed ribs. The rescue effort escalates into a massive operation involving the Royal Air Force and specialized mining teams. They try everything. They lower steel hooks to grab his clothes, but the fabric rips. They try to lower an oxygen tube, but the angle is too sharp. They even briefly considered the extreme medical option of fracturing the clavicles to narrow his shoulder width, but the medical consensus is that the shock would kill him instantly in his weakened state. For nearly 48 hours, Neil fights. His father waits outside the cave entrance, praying for a miracle that physics will not allow. The mud holds him with the force of a hydraulic press. Eventually, the voice from the deep stops. The breathing fades. Neil Moss takes his final, shallow breath, unable to fight the weight of the earth pressing against his diaphragm any longer. His heart stops in the silence of the deep earth. The tragedy is so absolute, the position so irretrievable, that his body is never recovered. The risk to other divers and climbers to extract his remains is deemed too high. Instead, the cave authorities make the grim decision to seal the shaft forever. They pour tons of concrete into the opening, turning the geological throat into a permanent tomb. A plaque is placed nearby, but the body remains down there to this day, encased in the stone. It is a haunting legacy. A young man who didn't die because of a mistake or an accident, but because his own biological need to breathe built the walls that killed him. October 12, 1998. Boulder, Colorado. The night air over the foothills is thin and cold, but on the roof of the Taco Bell on Baseline Road, there is warmth rising from the exhaust systems. It is here that 24-year-old Kevin Lee Haynes makes a calculation that will cost him everything. Kevin is not an employee. He is an intruder. His intent is likely burglary, a desperate attempt to enter the restaurant after hours to access the safe. He bypasses the doors, looking for a hidden entry point. He finds it in the form of a large metal ventilation stack protruding from the roof. To the untrained eye, it looks like a chimney, a direct ladder down into the kitchen. But this is not a chimney. It is a grease exhaust system, designed to extract hot, vaporized animal fat from the fryers below. Kevin removes the metal cap covering the vent. He looks down into the black hole. It seems wide enough. He decides to slide in, feet first, assuming he can control his descent by pressing his arms and legs against the sides of the duct, shimmying down like a climber. He lowers himself into the throat of the machine. The moment his weight transfers from the roof to the interior of the pipe, the trap springs. He has failed to account for the one invisible variable that makes this specific vent a death sentence: the residue. For years, this metal tube has been funneling hot, vaporized oil. The interior walls are coated in a thick, viscous layer of congealed grease and sludge. It is slipperier than ice. As soon as Kevin lets go of the rim, he does not climb. He slides. It is an uncontrolled, high-speed descent into the dark. He plummets down the vertical shaft, expecting to drop into the kitchen. But the duct does not stay the same width. Like a funnel, the engineering narrows as it approaches the hood unit above the fryers. Kevin hits this bottleneck with the full force of gravity. He wedges tight. His feet dangle in the open air above the fryers, but his hips and chest are jammed into the tapering metal cone. He is alive. He is conscious, and he tries to push himself back up. This is where the horror becomes visceral. Every surface he touches is coated in rancid, slippery slime. He tries to jam his hands against the walls to lift his weight, but they just slide off, smeared with black grease. He tries to kick his legs, but there is nothing to kick against. He is suspended in a frictionless void. The more he struggles, the more the grease acts as a lubricant, allowing gravity to pull him deeper into the wedge. He is trapped in a dark vertical cylinder that smells of stale cooking oil. The sensory deprivation is absolute. It is pitch black, silent, and the air is thick with chemical odor. But the real killer is the geometry. His arms are pinned above his head, a position that stretches the chest muscles and makes breathing incredibly difficult. As he hangs there, the weight of his lower body pulls down on his diaphragm. It is the textbook definition of positional asphyxia. To inhale, he has to lift his entire body weight against gravity, using only his respiratory muscles while slipping on grease. It is physically impossible. Slowly, over the course of the night, his strength drains away. His breaths become shallower. The panic accelerates the oxygen depletion in his blood. He is dying inches above the kitchen equipment, coated in the byproduct of the food industry. He eventually loses consciousness as the carbon dioxide levels in his brain rise. His heart stops beating in the darkness. The next morning, the opening crew arrives to start the day. They unlock the doors and prepare to fire up the fryers. They have no idea that directly above their heads, inside the metal hood system, a man is hanging dead. It isn't until later that the discovery is made, turning the fast food restaurant into a crime scene. When the police arrive, they find that extraction is impossible from below. They cannot pull him down without causing catastrophic damage to the body. They are forced to go to the roof, dismantle the ventilation unit, and cut the pipe open to free him. Kevin Lee Haynes didn't just get stuck. He was consumed by the machinery, sliding into a nightmare of oil and metal where the harder you fight, the faster you sink. It is a grotesque reminder that industrial systems are designed for smoke, not for the biology of a human being. August 25, 2010, Bakersfield, California. In the scorching heat of the San Joaquin Valley, a tragedy of obsession in architecture is about to unfold. The victim is not a burglar or a thrill seeker. She is Dr. Jacqueline Kotarek, a 49-year-old brilliant and respected internist, a woman who has spent her career saving lives. But on this Wednesday evening, the order of her professional life has collapsed. She arrives at the home of her on and off boyfriend, William Moody, in a state of frantic emotional distress. She is desperate to speak with him, to resolve a conflict that has consumed her thoughts. But Moody, wanting to avoid a confrontation, slips out the back door unnoticed. Jacqueline is left alone outside the locked house, fueled by adrenaline and a dangerous fixation. She refuses to leave. Logic recedes, desperation takes the wheel. She spots a ladder. She climbs to the roof. In her mind, the chimney is an entry point, a desperate back door to the person she wants to reach. It is a fatal miscalculation. Chimneys are designed to funnel smoke up, not to allow human bodies down. She removes the cap and slides in, feet first. Gravity claims her instantly. She slides down the smooth upper flue, but she fails to account for the smoke shelf, a structural narrowing just above the firebox designed to prevent downdrafts. About 10 feet down, the shaft tapers violently. Jacqueline hits this bottleneck with the full force of her momentum. She does not land in the fireplace. She wedges in the darkness just above it. The trap is absolute. Her hips pass through the narrowest point, but her ribcage and shoulders catch. The specifics of the posture are secondary to the terrifying result. She is immobilized in a straitjacket of soot and brick. She is alive. She is conscious. And she is screaming for help. This is where the true horror of the glass crypt reveals itself. A chimney is an architectural paradox. It is an open hole to the sky, yet it is one of the most soundproof places in a modern home. The masonry is thick, designed to insulate the house from the intense heat of a fire. That same insulation now works against her. It absorbs her voice. Her screams travel upward, dissipating into the hot Bakersfield sky, but they do not travel downward through the heavy iron damper and glass doors of the fireplace. 3 days pass. 3 agonizing revolutions of the earth. During this time, William Moody returns home. He eats, he sleeps, he watches television. He goes about the mundane routine of his life, completely unaware that the woman he was avoiding is dying less than 10 feet away from him, separated only by a layer of brick. Jacqueline is trapped in a vertical coffin, enduring the torture of positional asphyxia. The tight space restricts her chest wall. Every breath requires immense effort to push against the masonry. Slowly, her muscles fatigue. The carbon dioxide builds up in her blood. Dehydration thickens her blood. She is dying not from injury, but from the inability to sustain the mechanical act of breathing. She is alone in the dark, smelling the soot, hearing the muffled sounds of the life she wanted to be part of, realizing that her proximity is her tragedy. She eventually loses consciousness, and her heart stops. The silence in the chimney becomes permanent. It is not until 3 days later, on Saturday, that the horror is discovered. A house-sitter, noticing a foul odor and suspicious fluids leaking from the fireplace, investigates. The realization is shattering. Police and fire rescue are called, but this is not a rescue mission anymore. It is a recovery. The entrapment is so severe that the fire department cannot simply pull her out. They have to treat the house like a demolition site. For 5 hours, they use jackhammers and sledgehammers to dismantle the brickwork, peeling away the layers of the house to reveal the tomb within. When they finally expose the flue, the tragedy of her final position is undeniable. Dr. Kotarek died because she underestimated the unforgiving rigidity of the physical world. It is a haunting lesson in how quickly a respected, intelligent professional can be reduced to a prisoner of their own anatomy, dying a slow, lonely death in the very heart of a domestic sanctuary. August 11, 2004, Stuart, Florida. The humid heat hangs heavy over the Golden Gate community, but inside one specific duplex, the atmosphere is heavy with something far more sinister. Behind the closed blinds of a modest home, a slow-motion biological disaster has been unfolding in total silence for nearly 2,190 days. This is the residence of 40-year-old Gail Laverne Grimes. Weighing approximately 480 pounds at just 4 feet 10 inches, Gail has reached a point where her body has ceased to be a vessel for motion and has become a stationary cage. 6 years prior, Gail sat down on the sofa in her living room. It was a mundane action, a moment of rest. But then she simply did not get up. What began as a struggle with mobility transformed into a total surrender to gravity. For 6 years, she ate, slept, and existed on that single piece of furniture, becoming the center of a static universe. Over time, a terrifying biological phenomenon known as mechanical tissue integration began to take place. The human skin is a living, reactive organ. When subjected to constant, unyielding pressure against a textured surface, deprived of air, the skin's integrity fails. The microscopic fibers of the couch's upholstery acted like a trellis. As Gail's skin developed raw abrasions from lack of movement, the fabric pressed into the open wounds. In a misguided attempt to heal, her body began to grow new tissue around and through the fabric mesh. It was a slow, agonizing process of biological welding. By August 2004, the boundary between the woman and the furniture had been erased. She was no longer just sitting on the couch. She was anatomically fused with it. The crisis breaks not because she tries to stand, but because her breathing fails. A call is made to 911. When deputies and paramedics arrive, they walk into a wall of odor so potent that seasoned professionals recoil. It is the scent of ammonia and necrosis concentrated in a sealed room. The responders approach Gail, expecting a heavy lift extraction. They reach out to lift her limbs, and the true horror reveals itself. They cannot move her. Any attempt to pull her body from the cushions results in excruciating pain. They realize that lifting her would mean causing severe structural tissue damage. The fabric is embedded inches deep into her flesh. She is grafted to the seat. The rescue operation instantly shifts from a medical transport to an engineering challenge. The sheriff's office determines that the only way to save her life is to remove the entire environment she is attached to. The scene becomes surreal. A team of responders dons full Tyvek hazmat suits with respirators, gearing up as if handling a toxic spill. Since Gail cannot be separated from the couch, and the couch cannot fit through the door, they must dismantle the house. They remove the large sliding glass patio doors, widening the aperture of the home. A construction crew builds a temporary wooden ramp. It takes 12 men to physically lift the massive wooden frame of the couch with Gail still fused to it. They slide the entire unit onto a flatbed trailer attached to a pickup truck, as no ambulance is large enough. Gail remains conscious throughout, lying on the object that has been her entire world for 6 years. As they wheel her out into the fresh air for the first time in a decade, The tragedy is laid bare under the Florida sun. She is transported to Martin Memorial Hospital South, where emergency teams face an impossible surgical decision. To treat her failing lungs and massive sepsis, they must separate her from the foreign object. But the couch is no longer a foreign object. It is a parasitic extension of her dermis. The surgical separation is traumatic, akin to a complex extensive tissue detachment. The shock to her system is catastrophic. Her body, weakened by years of atrophy, cannot handle the sudden physiological stress of disconnection. Despite efforts, Gail Laverne Grimes passes away at 3:12 a.m. The official cause of death is morbid obesity, but the reality is far more complex. She died from the systemic collapse caused by being trapped in a prison of her own making, a grim reminder that life requires movement, and without it, the line between the living body and the inanimate world begins to blur. November 17, 2003, St. Louis, Missouri. The setting for this tragedy is the most intimate and mundane room in any modern home, the bathroom. It is a space associated with privacy and relaxation, but for 48-year-old Doris Vera, it is about to transform into a ceramic prison. Doris is a woman of substantial mass, weighing approximately 500 pounds. For a person of this size, gravity is a constant, exhausting adversary. Every movement requires immense energy. Standing and walking are battles against physics. On this Monday, she seeks the only relief available to her, a bath. This is where the trap begins to set itself, disguised as comfort. When she enters the tub, the water displaces her weight, providing buoyancy that counteracts gravity. It allows her to slide into the porcelain basin with deceptive ease. She feels lighter, weightless, free from the crushing burden of her own biology. She relaxes, unaware that she has just entered a mechanical system she cannot exit. The bath ends. Doris reaches forward and pulls the drain plug. This is the moment the laws of physics turn against her. As the water swirls down the drain, the buoyancy vanishes. Gravity returns instantly, slamming her full 500-pound weight back onto the hard porcelain surface. But there is a second, more sinister force at play: the vacuum effect. When her massive soft tissue settles against the smooth, wet curve of the tub, it expels the air between her skin and the ceramic. As the water drains away, it creates a perfect airtight seal. The wet skin creates a high-friction bond with the tub. She is no longer just sitting. She is suctioned to the bottom. Doris tries to stand. She places her hands on the rim to push herself up, but the mathematics of the lever are impossible. Her center of gravity is too low, and her upper body strength is nowhere near sufficient to lift a quarter-ton of dead weight against the suction of the tub. She slips. She struggles, but every movement only exhausts her further. She is trapped in the ceramic coffin. She is alive, she is conscious, and she is completely immobilized in her own home. The days begin to pass. Monday turns into Tuesday. Tuesday bleeds into Wednesday. The house is silent. Doris remains in the tub, naked and vulnerable, unable to reach the faucets to turn the water back on, unable to reach a phone. The horror of this death is not in the violence of impact, but in the slow, quiet erosion of life. The bathroom becomes a biohazard zone. She is forced to relieve herself where she sits. The severe lack of sanitation begins to compromise her skin integrity, which is already breaking down from the relentless pressure against the porcelain. But the true killer is internal. It is a condition known as rhabdomyolysis. Because she cannot move, her muscles are being crushed by her own weight. The muscle tissue begins to break down rapidly, releasing a protein called myoglobin into her bloodstream. This protein is toxic to the kidneys. As she lies there, dehydrated and starving, her kidneys are being poisoned from the inside out. She begins to hallucinate. The thirst becomes agonizing. She is surrounded by plumbing, by pipes that carry water, yet she cannot drink. 5 days pass. 120 hours of staring at the tile pattern on the wall, waiting to die. It is not until Friday that a cousin, concerned by the silence, breaks into the apartment. The scene they find is one of absolute stillness. Doris is still conscious, but she is in a state of septic shock. The rescue is not simple. Paramedics cannot just lift her. They have to physically break the suction seal that holds her to the tub. It takes a team of firefighters to extract her from the porcelain grip. She is rushed to the hospital, but the damage is irreversible. Her system is flooded with toxins, her kidneys have failed, and her body cannot recover from the shock of the ordeal. Doris Vera dies in the hospital shortly after her rescue. She died because she trusted the safety of a household object, unaware that the combination of water, smooth ceramic, and her own mass would create a physics trap from which escape was impossible. These 6 victims spent their final hours, or years, realizing that no one was coming. Now, look at your own room. If you slipped and fell into that narrow gap behind your bed right now, how long would it take for someone to actually find you? Not miss you on a text, but physically find your body? Be honest. If the answer scares you, write the number of days in the comments. Subscribe if you value the cold truth over comforting lies.